Hello everybody, it's I, Eternal Flame here, and welcome to another JJK chapter review. Yeah, that's right, after a month of waiting, we are back, and today we are here for chapter 262, part 2, The Decisive Battle, the Uninhabited Demon-Infested Shinjuku, part 34. The name doesn't even get old, like even with the part 2 added to it. While it's not as good as a normal Shinjuku showdown because of that part 2, the name still doesn't get old. But basically, for the people who are a bit confused, the reason why this is part 2 is mainly because the last chapter was 7 pages long, so it's more so like this is the complete version of 262 with everything else that was missed, and this is basically everything that should have been in that chapter but couldn't because Gege was sick. But now that Gege is fully recovered, he's decided let's actually finish up chapter 262 before moving to 263. So without further ado, let's get straight into the chapter. And the chapter starts out immediately with Rika hugging Yuta's body, with Rika still crying, and I'm gonna be honest with you, this is making it feel like it's more and more likely, or at least Gege is trying to paint the picture more and more that Yuta is gonna die at the end of the 5 minutes, but at the same time, I don't believe Gege. I don't believe that's what's going to happen considering everything we know about Kenjaku, but hey, we don't actually know fully how Kenjaku's technique works, so it might be wrong, we don't really know yet, but I'm really excited to see what ended up happening. As the chapter continues right where we left off, with Yuta in Gojo's body throwing Sukuna over his head and slamming him right onto the ground. However, at that same time, Sukuna blocks a kick coming right at him from Yuta Akotsu. As then we get thoughts from Yuta, as Yuta thinks to himself, Rika-chan isn't haunting this body. I can only use Limitless now. Looks like using Kenjaku's technique simultaneously is a no-go. Sukuna can't use his slash that bisects the world with his left arm gone. Aside from amplification, he shouldn't have any tricks left up his sleeve to bypass infinity. So this confirms that Yuta Akotsu is not able to use any of his copied curse techniques, and more importantly, Rika is not going to be joining in the battle at all, and Rika is basically linked to Yuta's body completely, which means it's just going to be Yuta in Gojo's body. However, very quickly, another problem begins to pop up in Yuta Akotsu taking Gojo's body, which is Sukuna almost landing a punch on Gojo's body because Yuta misjudged the distance between himself and Sukuna because Gojo is a little bit taller and a little bit longer than he expected. As Yuta then thinks to himself, I had these same thoughts during Switch training. Gojo Sensei's limbs are so absurdly long. From the outside, Limitless technique seems flawless and all-powerful, and yet, it's way more sensitive than I thought. A single round of Switch training, I was nowhere near enough to master it. So first up, this does confirm what a lot of people have been saying, me myself included, for a long while, being the Limitless isn't what makes Gojo the strongest, is that Gojo is strong with the Limitless, and it's Gojo's skill that makes Limitless so strong. However, it's also more than just the Limitless on what's putting Yuta so much off his game. It's also the fact he's in a much taller, much bigger, and much better body in comparison to normal. Like, even their arm lengths are different, and even their height lengths are different. To put this into perspective, Yuta Akotsu is going from being 5'9" to being over 6 feet tall in this new body that he has to get adjusted to that has longer than normal limbs. But anyways, let's get right back into the chapter, where Yuta Akotsu continues to think to himself, I finally get why you need the 6 eyes to use this thing. It'll be fine, I'm the strongest after all. He was remembering Gojo's flashback. Just what did it take for you to say that so confidently? And I believe this is the final bit of confirmation that we ever needed that the Limitless does require the 6 eyes to work in order to control it, even though we've had other characters say it, but this is the final piece of the coffin that I think is going to put the argument 6 feet deep into the ground. But also in that moment, Yuta Akotsu is really just acknowledging how much effort Gojo needed to put in to become the strongest, how much effort that Gojo needed to put in order to become as strong as he was today. However, Sukuna, being the relentless person he is, just immediately tells Yuta, you think you have time to daydream, before landing a punch straight on his body, acknowledging the fact that Yuta Akotsu is having struggles with controlling such a technique. Before it's him, we get an internal dialogue from Sukuna about him basically analyzing the entire situation, where he first talks about the fact that he already knew that Yuta technique was copy, as then he also goes over what he believes the condition for copying is, which is feeding the target's body or part of it to that Banshee, obviously talking about Rika. Sukuna also realizes in that moment that Yuta Akotsu is not either able to use the copy techniques that he had access to in his original body, or even able to use Rika right now, something that we already knew from Yuta Akotsu earlier in the chapter, that he was not able to use those copy techniques, but Sukuna is realizing that he only is capable of using Limitless in the current moment. Then he goes on to say that even if he could use those copy techniques, that it would be pointless because he knows how they work by this point, has a good idea of all the copy techniques that Yuta Akotsu has access to, and they wouldn't be as good as using something like the Limitless. Furthermore, he also confirms in his domain he's only capable of using one copy techniques and not using several copy techniques at a time inside of his domain. Which that is extremely interesting because it does confirm there is some possible way to use multiple curse techniques at once. Granted, we actually already know of one way to use multiple curse techniques at once because of something Sukuna had showed us in the fight against Gojo. where the curse technique that you are using can be different from the curse technique that your domain is using, because Sukuna was using 10 shadows on himself to continue adapting, while his domain was using the technique that was imbued into it. However, that's about everything we know about using several curse techniques at once. As Sukuna starts to question how long can he even keep that technique active for, if it's going to be active after the 5-minute timer is up, and what is going to be his next move, which he believes his next move is going to be the unlimited hollow technique, the technique that Gojo would use at the end of their battle against Sukuna. However, instead we get a flashback to Gojo, where Gojo is telling Yuta that his curse energy is all over the place, and he's asking if Kusakabe has said nothing to him about it, until we get the Yuta protection squad calling Gojo out on the fact that he is mainly harsh to Yuta Okotsu and a little bit too harsh. Before then we return to the present, as Yuta Okotsu thinks to himself, I'm being thorough, going through Gojo Sensei memories one by one. And this confirms something else that is very, very important to note and confirm. The way that Kenjaku's technique and looking through the memories worked is it's not a subconscious thing. You don't automatically get the memories coming back to you. You have to actively look through all of them at once. Which explains something that a lot of people were confused about, which was the entire thing of Yuta Okotsu not having access to all of Gojo's memories, because he clearly did not know about Sukuna being able to use domain amplification inside of a domain, but this just actively confirms that he's only able to look through the memories. He can't just actively have all the memories come back into him like it's an upload file. He actually has to look through all of it like he's reviewing footage, which really gives me some respect for Kenjaku, if I'm being honest with you guys. Because Kenjaku in the time period of a year looked through all of Geto's memories, figured out how to use his curse technique better than Geto ever could, mainly because in this chapter it's very heavily confirmed you don't get the skills from the body itself automatically, which means Geto did not have all of Kenjaku's skill, while Kenjaku did not have all of Geto's skill. This is their own skills respectively, just to put that into the ground. But still, it is kind of crazy to me that Kenjaku was able to pull that off nonetheless. As it is then Yuta tries to do the chant, but Sukuna doesn't let him. Sukuna immediately interrupts him, and Yuta Okotsu has to figure out the hard way that Sukuna is not going to let him finish that chant. However, it's then they move on to the next stage of their plan, where Yuta Okotsu does something that caught the audience, me, and Sukuna completely off guard, which was throwing in a tape recorder while beginning his chants, using blue to launch it back a bit before Inumaki, through the tape recorder, said, "Don't move." Before it is then, Yuta Okotsu finishes off the chant, and we have the visual of Hollow Purple about to activate, or what looks like Hollow Purple is about to activate, with the two orbs colliding with each other, rather than them normally being intersecting with each other, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later, but first I want to talk about the Inumaki stuff now that we have reached the end of the chapter. Now first, I will admit I thought this was really overpowered, but then I actually kind of realized how this worked, and it is nowhere near as overpowered as I thought. It's just a normal usage of cursed speech. It's just similar to when he used it on Miwa through the phone, but that's mainly because of how we know cursed speech functions. Cursed speech and the damage it causes on the user is not caused because of the word they use, or well, the word they use is a part of it, but what's the more important part is the thing that they are hitting. After all, the stronger the thing that the cursed speech user is hitting, the more and more damage the cursed speech user will end up taking as a result of that. That's why he's currently spitting up and coughing up a lot of blood. However, in my opinion, this does also fit into another problem that I have had with Jujutsu High. Well, this isn't really a problem, but more so their biggest mistake that they have made this entire fight, which is they have never really put enough eggs into one basket. They are really trying to spread their resources thin and have multiple plans in order to beat Sukuna, when they should in reality try and focus on making sure one of their plans has a higher chance in comparison to saving it for another plan. For example, this would have been a lot more useful against Sukuna if Higuruma was still alive, in order to use it with the Sword of Execution plan. Now granted, this would have much worse effects on Inumaki, I can admit that, but at the same time, we're taking out Sukuna. If you have the chance to take out Sukuna, the throat can go away. Inumaki doesn't need his throat anymore. Binding vows for the win, but they decided not to go with that. Granted, there is also a chance this wouldn't have worked on him, but at the same time, it's at least worth trying, at least in my opinion. However, up next I'm going to talk about Yuta's Hollow Purple that he fired off in this chapter, and we don't really know if this is actually Yuta succeeding in firing off the Hollow Purple or not. I kind of think it's going to be, but at the same time, we don't know what the details of the Hollow Purple is going to be. I don't think it's going to be on par with Gojo, mainly because a huge theme of this entire chapter is Yuta Okotsu is not Gojo level, and Yuta Okotsu is not able to use Limitless the same way that Gojo can. He's still struggling to use it, and he doesn't have Gojo's memories or Gojo's experience. However, I will say this, if this Hollow Purple is on par with Gojo's Hollow Purple, this is probably the end of the fight, but I doubt that it is going to be. But I'm also really excited and curious to see what's going to happen next week. This chapter is really hyped. So that's this chapter review. I hope you all have a good day. I'm going to see you all later. Peace out.